Hello and welcome to and for those of you that do not speak Tunisian, welcome to Meet Me.
Do we want to do that again?
The movies.
We'll keep going. I believe it.
Welcome to Meet Me at the Movies. I am Noel T. II, hanging out with a bunch of cool folks. We're gonna shake things up.
Where are they?
That is Abe Froman. That's right, the sausage king of Cleveland County right here. Abe Froman. Abe, welcome.
I'm working on Livermore.
Good to
trying
see
to
you.
diversify.
Good to see you, man.
Good to see you. It's great to be here as always.
Yes, it is. We're also glad to have back with us, to my right, Mr. Christian Jessup.
Well, I'm just honored you called me cool. That's quite the honor. Not many people have given to me. So.
Well, you know.
I've never been called cool.
I like
if I thought he meant it, I'd be touched, but I don't.
Well, see, now I'm wondering.
Yeah.
We're just in there together. So.
You can't believe him half the time.
I like to butter people up, and then I like to tear them down. That is Christian Jessup, the Critics' Choice Scholar. Catherine's not with us this week. She's doing scholarly activities. So we'll have her back at some point. And so,
in other words, she had better things to do.
Yes, had better things to do.
I wish I had.
Back in the studio in the editing suite. Let's look at the Tim cam. Let's see who's there. Hey, look, there's Tim, Miranda. What? I see some arm in the back.
That's Joe.
Hey, Joe. It's Joe. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you here, man. He's doing the little rabbit ears thing.
He made some hand signals with his
hands.
Hands.
Hope you guys are doing well.
We get those around here anyway.
Yeah, well, we do appreciate you listening. Appreciate you watching. If you're listening through the podcast or online, wgwg.org. You can always email us here at C19 TV for your comments, questions, viewer mail, non-viewer mail. What's that email address, Greg?
I was afraid you'd ask. info@c19.tv.
That's right. I'm going to ask that of Christian a little bit later, and we'll see if he
I came up with that address. You'd think I'd know it,
Dude,
right?
that is the most awesome of email addresses that you could have ever come up with.
Speaking of buttering up, what does he want from us?
Nicely done.
Yeah,
Nicely done.
there has to be some hidden motive
You
here.
want me to take this to an hour, don't you? No, it's not happening.
We've got a lot to talk about today. A lot of movies, including 3 in theaters, and also we're going to do a take 5 if we get to it. Tried to get to it last week with Christian talking about perfect scores, perfect film scores. Yeah. And so we got a lot to talk about. We'll start off with a film, Western, that is in theaters now. It's called Hostiles, or for those of you that want to pronounce it differently, Hostiles. You can choose, but after speaking to Wes Studi, who actually stars in this film, he says Hostiles, Mr. Manning.
You spoke to him?
No.
Well, you've known him anyway.
I did work with him.
Yeah.
And I will say this about Wes Studi. If you saw Last of the Mohicans, he was the bad guy. He was Magua in Last of the Mohicans. And he was a really evil character, but he was probably the nicest person I met during the whole course of filming, other than Daniel Day-Lewis, but Wes Studi, quite amazing. This film stars Wes Studi, Christian Bale, also Rosamund Pike in this, and it is a Western. It takes place in 1892, New Mexico, and it's one of those really raw Westerns, and what I mean by raw, it feels realistic. There are issues. You're seeing a very wild, raw, and untamed frontier, but you're seeing the Native Americans who have been displaced and being kind of put on reservations, and some are just being put in stockades. You're seeing that issue of the white man being pretty evil and disrespectful to anything that doesn't make them happy. You're seeing that unfold, but you're also seeing the savagery of the Native Americans in some instances taking on just settlers on farms and wiping out whole families. So you're seeing both sides of the issue going on here, but in the story itself, you got Christian Bale's character who has really grown up through the ranks of a military officer, and he's done everything that's been asked of him. And if that means killing women and children who are Native Americans, he's done it without question, because that's been what he's called to do. Well, and so he has no love for those that are different than he is. And so he's been now asked to take this dying chief to Montana, back to his homeland. This dying chief has cancer. We're told he has cancer. And that was the one thing I'm like, okay, did they have a name for cancer in 1892? I don't know.
Be worth some researching.
I don't know. But they do mention that he's dying, and they've worked out this agreement to take him back to his homeland. And so Christian Bale, who very obvious his character hates the Native Americans, is ordered to transport safely this dying chief and his family to Montana from New Mexico. And he has paperwork, and he has to deal with his whole internal things as well. Rosamund Peke's character early on in the film, her whole family is murdered savagely by a tribe. And so she has to deal, and she's picked up along the way, and so she has to deal with overcoming her fear and her anger toward these people that are within this same group. And it's a group of just less than a dozen that are making this trip. And every character conflict you can imagine shows up in this particular film. I will say it's one of the best Westerns that I've seen in years. Every year, you'll see a Western pop up, but this one is solid on really every single level. Very authentic from the technical aspects of it, set design, the costuming, just the beautiful landscapes were all there. Music, sound, cinematography, casting, the editing, the dialogue, all of that was really, really solid. There are scenes in this movie of pure emotion without dialogue. There's scenes that you get to see Christian Bale's character in just total anger and other times in total anguish, and there's no dialogue and there's no sound except for just this musical score. And it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. Hard to watch at times because of the realistic aspect of it, very violent. A strong cast and a lot of faces you're going to recognize in this film. And also the character growth for the two main characters, Rosamund Peke's character and Christian Bale, really amazing. This is a film that I really wish the studios would have pushed earlier in award season. I wish they had pushed this, because I think this would have ended up on my best of list for the year. Really solid film. I'm giving this an A rating. So I'm really happy when I get a chance to see Westerns. I grew up watching Westerns and war films with my grandfather, who loved them. And
I was going to ask if you liked Westerns. It's kind of an acquired taste, maybe.
Yeah, it is, and I always have, and I think for me it does take me back to my childhood of watching those films with my grandfather.
But it does sound like this was a much different Western than maybe what we've been used to seeing on the screen. Is that true?
Yeah, I think so. I think, I think in recent years we've seen more of those films that have that kind of realistic feel to it.
I think that started with Silverado.
Well, yeah, Silverado did, but it had a lot of comedy thrown in for the sake of comedy. But I think Unforgiven with Clint Eastwood really, really took it to a different level. And so I would put this on par with Unforgiven.
Wow.
Really?
It's not going to get the acclaim. It's kind of under the radar. It is in wide release now, but I highly recommend Hostiles, which is now
playing here in Shelby.
It is playing here in Shelby as well. Absolutely. Awesome. Questions, thoughts before we move on? Phantom Thread?
No, not really. Okay. I've never been a huge Western fan. My dad did like them. Probably the last Western I saw that I truly enjoyed was True Grit.
Yeah.
The Coen brothers.
Oh, yeah.
Rebooted that. Well, both. I like both for different reasons.
Yeah.
But the latest one was just fantastic. Well, The Revenant did not really get me very excited.
Yeah, we could spend some time talking about The Revenant. I thought, I had my issues with The Revenant. I thought it had some good qualities, bad qualities, but there was one thing of this, the theme I think that holds true throughout this whole movie is one of the characters, and this is kind of a supporting character that's kind of thrown in midway through. He says, we're all guilty of something. Nobody's completely innocent. And I think that holds true because even the issues that people were having with each other, they were guilty of having issues for different reasons. And so it speaks to race, it speaks to racial conflicts, it speaks to who we are and the choices we make in life. And when you're ordered to do something, should you always go through with it if you're ordered to do it for the wrong reason? So really solid film.
Interestingly timely, perhaps.
Yeah, I think so.
These days.
It's very relevant for today. Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about the only Oscar-nominated film I have not seen. The movie is called Phantom Thread with Daniel Day-Lewis. Love this guy. He is retiring, or so he says. So this could be our last chance at seeing him on screen.
He was with West Studi.
He was with West Studi and Last the Mohicans.
We have a theme here.
Bunch of other films. You don't see Daniel Day-Lewis on film often, but when you do, it's worth the wait. So let's get your thoughts. Christian got a chance to check this
Yeah,
out.
so I got a chance this week to see Phantom Thread, and you and I were talking before the show. Like you said, he doesn't do films often. Lincoln in 2012 was the last time we saw a movie with Daniel Day-Lewis in it. So Phantom Thread, the storyline is basically we have the story of a fashion designer in England that has a unique relationship with one of his models. And this is introduced very early on, and it just carries throughout the rest of the film.
Unique
in a way that it's like an on-again, off-again relationship.
Okay.
And I chose relationship very carefully because you can choose to call it a romantic relationship, you can choose not to.
Okay.
Just a unique relationship,
Okay.
I'll say, without giving anything away. And it very much explores that movie throughout. As I would have expected with a Daniel Day-Lewis movie, it's very character-driven.
Okay.
Not much in the way of plot. It's an interesting story, but there are very few actors, I think, that could have carried the story and made it an impressive piece of filmmaking besides Daniel Day-Lewis.
Okay.
Like you were saying, there were lots of scenes without dialogue that were really just carried by his facial expressions in the film and by the musical score. Johnny Greenwood, who's actually a member of Radiohead, did the musical score for this. And it's this really classic, like old school 1950s Hollywood score, lush strings,
Yeah.
this soft piano, really incredible, especially not something I would have really expected from him to have scored, but just there were entire scenes that you went minutes and minutes without dialogue and him just playing music, and you just see Daniel Day-Lewis's expressions as he goes throughout his workday.
Wow.
And really, I think that's the element that carried this. Let's see. He just shined in the role, and I think that this was a film that was specifically made for him. I don't really know the production details, so I would be interested to see, was he on board with this before they'd really written the script? Because it very much seemed like he was meant for this role.
Well, he has worked with this director multiple times.
Paul Thomas Anderson, they've worked together a lot. But yeah, just a very old school style of film, long lingering shots, big like wide scenery shots that set up for then like really close ups. So really it's just a type of filmmaking that we don't see anymore. And I talked to a few people when we left the theater, and some really enjoyed it. They really liked seeing Daniel Day-Lewis in it. Some got a little bored with it, which I personally didn't, but I can understand where they're coming from, because like I said, this isn't one of those action plots. There's not the huge climax throughout the story. It just kind of is telling his life and his relationship with one of his models, and that really carries the entire story, is that relationship. And so I ended up giving Phantom Thread a B+.
Okay.
Because the story, when I was evaluating it from a story perspective, was a C, but the acting was just absolutely incredible and really elevated this film beyond just what a simple story could have been.
And you felt like the music really worked for you too.
It did.
It was a little different, but it worked for you.
It did, and it's actually up for Best Original Score at the Oscars, and it's getting a lot of attention, and I thought it was well deserved.
Yeah, and this is a film that you would really think a Daniel Day-Lewis film would automatically be considered, okay, this is going to be an Oscar winning type film.
He did win for Lincoln his last outing.
Yeah, he did. He will not. I would be really surprised if he won the Oscar for this one. And a big part of that, and we'll definitely talk closer to it as we get to the Oscars, is they really didn't push this film throughout awards season, and that hurts it. That really does hurt it. I mean, they didn't spend much money or much time at all to make that happen. So.
And that's a real shame, because his performance in it was stellar, and I think if they'd pushed it a little more, we could really see him rising to the top. And I mean, who knows, he might still. Yeah. In my mind, he's a front runner just based on the performance.
Okay. So the movie is worth recognition.
Definitely worth recognition. Definitely worth checking out, all because of his performance in it.
You said that some friends thought it was a little slow. Isn't that a danger nowadays for people who were maybe raised on fast cuts, MTV type of music video, fast action shots and edits, that when you do have a picture that slows things down, takes his time, ponders the circumstances of the characters, there's a perception by some people that, boy, this is slow, this is boring.
Oh, absolutely.
Get me
That's
out
one
of
of the
here.
things.
And that's a shame, because they're missing out on the ambience of a lot of films.
Oh, I agree. And that's one of the things that Christian and also Catherine, we're going to bring them in throughout these next few months, and they're going to look at some classic films, and they're going to look at it from the perspective of, is it still worthy of being classic, but also looking at it through the eyes and the minds of 20-year-olds, well, 21-year-olds, but you know what I'm saying. So yeah, and so we're going to look at Hitchcock next week.
Well, and that's exactly why I called it an old school type of film, is because it is taking its time. It's not worried about when can we get to the next exciting moment or the next dramatic, like, oh my goodness, Like, there aren't many of those in it. It's taking its time, it's lingering shots on people's faces, on scenery, and it very much reminded me of those films that we see in the 50s and 60s that a lot of my generation doesn't enjoy for that exact reason.
Yeah. Well, good deal.
Michael Bay did not direct this.
No, not in the slightest.
No, and Bruckheimer did not produce it. But come back after the break, and we are going to talk about a Bruckheimer-produced film that may be worthy of seeing in theaters. That and Take 5 right after this break. More Meet Me at the Movies.
Hi, I'm Linda Hopper, and I'm excited about Woman to Woman right here on C19 TV. Each month, my guest and I would chat about issues relating to women in general, but with a special focus on women right here in Cleveland County. Our topics will range from serious issues such as domestic violence and workplace challenges to fun topics such as fashion and healthy lifestyles and much, much more. So please join me as we discuss the issues, interests, and inspiration of women everywhere on Woman to Woman.
She gets her hair from her mom, her eyes from her dad, and her drugs from her home medicine cabinet. Fact: more people die from drug overdoses than from car crashes or gun violence. And over 50% of those deaths are from prescription drugs. Prescription drug abuse is preventable. 1. Secure and take regular inventory of our medications. 2. Dispose of unused or expired medications. 3. Share this message with others. Be aware, don't share, lock your meds.
Hello, I'm Rhonda Benfield from School Matters. Join me every other week as we bring you news and information from the students and staff of Cleveland County Schools. We feature administrators, teachers, students, even coaches. We discuss what's new in our schools and the issues we face in providing an exceptional educational experience in the 21st century. You can find us on C19 TV, a broadcast service of Cleveland Community College, or stream us at www.c19.tv.
They're gonna put me in the movies. They're gonna make a big star out of me.
Welcome back to Meet Me at the Movies. I am Noel T. II, hanging out with Principal Ed Rooney over there. Principal Rooney, how are you, sir?
Identify with him.
And over to my right, Mr. Christian Jessup.
Still feeling cool.
Cool. Still feeling cool. He is the Critics' Choice Scholar. And back behind the scenes making this all happen, Tim Foster, Tim Cam, Miranda, how are you? Is that Miranda?
That's Miranda.
Yeah, Miranda, good to see you. Thanks for being here. You're still awake back there, which is always good. I have to ask that question because we don't want the camera just stuck on me. You're somewhat awake. Somewhat.
If anyone's going to be asleep, it's going to be the audience.
Yes, yes. And we are going to do a, if you look behind Mr. Tillman there, you will see those 3 chairs back behind him. We're going to bring in a studio audience of 3 at some point and let them give us some thoughts as well. You like that?
I can only imagine what that would be like.
Or just some booze.
Or what?
Or just some booze, you know.
I could get some dummies from the medical lab down the hall.
Yeah, we could. We could do that. We'll see what we can do. If you missed the first half of the show, we talked about Phantom Thread, and you gave that a B+.
I did.
Also talked about Hostiles, gave that an A. And now we're going to quickly talk about another film that's in theaters, and it's a Western really in its own right. Greg, as you were saying during the break, 12 Strong. This movie is a war film based on a true story and based on a book, 2009 bestseller called Horse Soldiers by Doug Stanton. This movie takes place just weeks after 9/11. And you've got a group of Special Forces men, 12 of them, that are really kind of volunteered to go in and take on this mission of finding a warlord to team up with to try to wipe out this Taliban leader. And that's what the story kind of follows is, you know, will these 12 find a way to do this? It's one of these missions that's truly under the radar. Not a lot of people know about it. There's only 12 of them. They're not going in just as consultants. They're going in to help lead this effort. So you think about the conflicts that they're going up against, not just man versus man, character versus character because of the war, but also cultural conflicts, language barriers, and also The horsebacks going up against tanks. And,
Yeah.
and yes, that is not something that was just thrown in for the sake of artistic exploration in the film. This actually did happen. And if you go to New York City, you go to Liberty Park, you're going to see a monument, a huge bronze monument in honor of these men who took
horse
on
soldiers or whatever
this
they
mission.
called them.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
horse soldiers.
Wow.
And Chris Hemsworth is in this, Michael Shannon in this. They're the two lead stars. There are other ones that you're going to recognize as well, as far as characters you're going to recognize. It's really a fascinating story. Before the break, I was telling you that my grandfather and I would watch war films, and we would also watch westerns together. Well, he was in the war. He was in World War II. He fought on the shores of Normandy. He was in Battle of the Bulge. So this guy, you know, he fought in Patton's Third Army. So for him to watch these films afterwards, especially when I started becoming a teenager, and we would talk a little bit more about his experience, it was pretty fascinating. And I every time I get a chance to see a war film in particular, I get really a closer look into what my grandfather experienced. So for me, these movies that I watch relating to war are as personal as they are, you know, professional. And so this film is really solid. It's got all that you would really look for in a war film. Are there some liberties that are taken? Absolutely. That is always going to happen when you're basing something on a true story and you're taking it from page to screen.
But relatively true to events.
Relatively true to the events. You know, there are some scenes that you watch and you find yourself asking, okay, did they do this just for?
I did.
Just for the audience. So you saw this too?
Yeah, I saw it a couple nights ago.
Well, anything else you want to add story-wise before we get
No,
our
I mean,
take on it?
I'm like you. I sat there wondering, and you always do when you see something based on a real event, what really happened, what probably didn't happen. And to me, that pulls you out of the story a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'm like you. I enjoyed it. I mean, it was a Jerry Bruckheimer action flick.
Yeah, he produced
based on
this.
a true story.
Right,
So,
he produced this.
Yeah. And Chris Hemsworth was solid. Everyone was good in it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was edited superbly. Bruckheimer. It's not like he's new at this.
Right.
And it's just a crowd pleaser.
Yeah, it is, and it's got scenes without dialogue, and you know, you have these action sequences followed by these kind of dramatic shots of setting stories up and looking at how characters interact with each other, and I really thought that was done well.
The Afghanistani warlord he was working with, that the Green Berets were working with. I don't know the actor, but he was fascinating. I thought he was really solid in that.
And stick around to the end of this movie because you'll see kind of the follow-up. It'll give you updates on what actually happened with those main characters as well. And so, I was really impressed with this, and I would actually go back and see this again. And so I'm giving it an A-. What is your rating on this?
Yeah, I give it an A-. That sounds about right.
Yeah. So if you like war films, recommend checking it out. Well, we've got time to take 5 with Christian Jessup, and let's look at 5 perfectly amazing film scores.
All right, so first of all, my criteria for a perfectly amazing film score, I decided that I wanted to make sure that, first of all, it functioned perfectly within the film. You know, I may love the music for the movie, but if it doesn't work in the picture for me, then it's not perfectly amazing. And so I tried to separate that as far as like what I enjoy listening to, and instead just look at what works best within the film. So first on my list, I have Casablanca from 1942. And that music is by Max Steiner, and it's really not his most well-known musical score. He did King Kong, Gone with the Wind, so I mean, he was really on top of things in the movie scoring business
The John
at this
Williams
time.
of his day.
Yeah, exactly. Or a lot of people
Hans
probably say
Zimmer.
John Williams is the Max Steiner of his day.
Okay.
But Casablanca for me just stands above the rest of his scores because in a movie that's a bunch of romanticized, you know, cliche moments that all work together, he created a perfectly romanticized cliche score.
Okay.
And it's so perfect, and it just really helps the emotion of the film. The love theme, as time goes by, is still iconic, and Warner Brothers still uses that as their logo theme. So whenever you go to the movies, if there's a Warner Brothers logo that plays, then that's actually the song as time goes by from Casablanca.
Wow.
All right, Star Wars is my next one. You know, it's hard not to include that on the list because really, Star Wars 1977 by John Williams, it brought film music to where it is today. There's no arguing having this on a list of perfectly amazing scores. You can compare it to even Wagner's operas in the 1800s. It's just this grand scale. And now that he's done 8 films of this music. I mean, he's got hours and hours and hours of stuff, which really is like Wagner's, 12-hour ring
absolutely.
cycle. And it's on such a large scale and so many themes that people still know.
Okay, awesome. So Star Wars, Casablanca. What's number 3 on your list?
Number 3 is The Mission, 1986, Ennio Morricone. I hope I'm saying his name correctly. I apologize if I'm not. And
I know who you're talking about.
you know who I'm talking about?
And for Anita, if he's saying it wrong, let us know. Let us know.
Yeah, because I think we're probably saying it wrong.
Probably, so we'll see. But he's actually really well known for the spaghetti western films in the 60s and 70s.
A lot of Clint Eastwood stuff.
Yeah, a lot of Clint Eastwood stuff. But The Mission was a much different film, and this is just him putting raw emotion on display. And really, it's just one of the most beautiful listening experiences I've ever seen. And you just are watching the film mesmerized by it. I really think this is one of the cases where you see music become a character in the film.
Well, and that's really a tribute to Scorsese because he loves music. And if you watch any of his films, you'll see he approaches music as another character. So what's number 4 on your list?
Number 4 is Saving Private Ryan, another John Williams, 1998. And really, I think this is perfect, not only because of the music that's used in the film, but in the cases where music isn't used in the film. He and Steven Spielberg decided that they didn't want any action music. And so if you go back and watch, none of the action scenes have any music at all. It's just the sound effects and really gives you a sense of actually being there.
Right.
But then after the fact, when you look at the aftermath of the events, then just this really lush, soft, nostalgic, introspective music comes into play. And I think it's one of Williams' most beautiful patriotic scores that he's ever written. And it's really underappreciated because there's not much music, but when you listen to it and the moments it comes in, man, it's powerful.
Awesome. So Saving Private Ryan, The Mission, Star Wars, Casablanca, and number 5.
Number 5 is Pirates of the Caribbean, specifically At World's End.
Okay.
This is a franchise that I think contains some of the most memorable music of the 21st century.
Really?
If you ask someone to hum anything written past 2000, I think that odds are this is probably the most hummable thing that they can think of.
The most hummable thing. I like that.
Yeah,
I like that.
I would love to poll some people and say, like, what's a movie theme that you could hum for me right now written after 2000? I think that Pirates would get it.
Greg, you had...
Which one is this at World's End? I got to
It's
mix
the
it
third
up
one.
after a while. The third one.
Which I thought for the longest time was going to be the last one.
Yeah.
And I
Maybe should have
kind
been.
of
World's
wish,
End,
I wish
you
it
would
had
think.
been. Yeah,
Well,
they
one
set it
was,
up like it would be.
Yeah. Okay, that's the third one.
But yeah, just a culmination of themes. It's just so many rich themes in this score that are recognizable even if people don't know to sing them. If you play it for them, they'd immediately know. And really, it ushered in a new genre of film music to where it's almost like a rock and roll mixed with orchestra. And so I think that it's the best of the 21st century.
Awesome. Christian, thanks for that Take 5. We will definitely have Christian continue to come back, and he'll continue to talk about music and movies as well. Well, we are about out of time. Ferris Bueller over there. That's right, Greg Tillman. Greg,
I wish I were happy.
you wish you had a water tower that said "Save Greg" on it. You wish. Christian, Jessup, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Tim, Miranda, thank you guys back there behind the camera, as always. Hey, and Joe, thank you for watching the show back there in the cheap seats. We'll leave you with a quote of the week. This comes from 12 Soldiers. From Colonel Mulholland, and this was Chris Hemsworth's character. The most important thing a man can take into combat is a reason why. Till next time, I'm Noel T. Manning II.
There's something flying around in here.
At the movies. Greg is swatting flies.
It's a bat or something.
So until next time, that's a wrap.
Happy trail.